Welcome to Showdown, where I bring together a group of theatre critics to talk about a show that we've each seen. In this episode, I bring together Paul Vale, Ray Rackham and Mae Trumata to talk about Scaramouche Jones.
I can see you, you know. Allow me to introduce myself. Scaramouche Jones. A soothing salve to be applied and reapplied, like a dressing, night after night, year after year. In the dressing room of a clown, my fifth white mask. Lie there, more dead than alive. My role in the final solution, when it began in earnest, was to dig mass graves. It is midnight, on the cusp between two centuries, and in the span of a single day, I have become orphan, slave, and exile.
Ginger Quiff Media.
So, hello everybody, welcome to Showdown episode 2. Exciting, and today we're talking about Scaramouche Jones, as I like to say it in my northern accent. So I'll just introduce the panel. So today we've got Mae Trumata, the freelance journalist and reviewer for the upcoming brilliant publication. And then over there we've got Paul Vale of the Stage newspaper. You've been, how many, 22 years now? Oh, have we lost him already?
Uh-oh.
Oh, there you go.
Did everyone else just freeze?
No, it was just you, Paul.
Oh dear.
I was just introducing you. Is it 22 years now you've been at the stage?
20. Don't add years on.
I don't know. I thought that was 2 years ago, you 20th.
Oh gosh, it might have been now. Wow. Yes, I am probably in my 22nd year at the stage.
And gorgeous Mr. Ray Rackham, writer, producer, director, and theatre critic for BritishTheatre.com now. Good. So let's make a start. So, I mean, we all saw this a few weeks ago now. So just to kind of freshen up in our memory. So this was an online screening of a very old play. I mean, the play was written in 1999 when it was set. And it has been revived a few times. But this was a brand new online presentation starring Shane Richie, no less. So who wants to kick us off? Ray, what did you think? Because you said some quite glowing reports about his performance in particular.
Me? Oh,
Yeah.
Ray, Mae? Which one is it? Sorry,
We'll start ladies first, so we'll go with Mae.
Oh, okay.
What did you think of Shane's performance in overall?
Well, coming from somebody who hasn't seen anything else from him, I thought it was really good. I mentioned it in my review, but even though it was really dark and like the makeup kind of overtook like his face, I could still feel his facial expressions. I could still like read them, and especially that scene where he was describing the shootings of like the little kids, that I felt like was the hook, line, and sinker for me, basically. So I thought he was really good in it. I haven't seen much of anything else that he's done, but according to the Justin Butcher, who wrote Scaramouche Jones, he did think that Ray would bring something new to it because of like his kind of like theater background. So
yeah, exactly. Because we do forget this. Although he started out and most famously was in EastEnders for a long time, and the Daz adverts, of course, he has got a background in theatre, and most recently was in F&B's Talking About Jamie, which I think he's now returning to as well. So Ray, you called his performance a tour de force.
Yeah, I mean, I was knocked out by it, to be perfectly honest, and I wasn't expecting much at all.
Why were you not expecting much?
Because I'm a snob, and And I thought we were going to have the kind of Alfie Moon, blue coat, Heidi High, Shane Richie. And what we actually got was, I think, one of the most affecting performances I've seen on a stream, well, since this whole horrid pandemic started. I loved it. I had lots of issues with much of what I saw, but Shane's performance, I think, was exemplary. And Mae, you absolutely pull out the moment that grabbed me, and it was the kind of alchemy that you sometimes get with a really good piece of written dialogue and a performer. He maybe only did it that one time, but capturing a moment very, very heartbreakingly and very beautifully in a horrifically disgusting way. That particular section with the children, and I suppose I brought a lot of my family history to that as well, with family members in music hall and that kind of vaudevillian lifestyle, and then those who were at the camps, and it just the combination of some quite awful, horrific stories told very well by an actor who I was expecting very little of. And I'm sure people are going to say, you snob. Yep.
Fair.
Is my Sondheim books on my mantelpiece. But yes, I was blown away, and I think it was the best performance I've seen from anyone streaming, certainly. But for a one-person piece, knocked out.
And what about you, Mr. Vale? What were your thoughts of Shane's performance?
Well, I came to this performance very differently to Ray, in that I've seen Shane Richie on stage a few times now. Firstly, in pantomime, in a way I would expect to see him. He was himself. He was funny. I remember him being on kids' TV years and years ago. And a couple of
we're old enough to remember win, lose, or draw.
Exactly. But I then saw that he was doing EastEnders, and I must admit I don't watch a lot of EastEnders, but I have seen his performances, and you realise that he was gaining a certain amount of credibility as a dramatic actor, as well as anything else. But again, stage is a very different creature. And then I saw him he was in The Entertainer, playing Archie Rice in The Entertainer a couple of years ago. And that was fascinating. And I thought, yes, he's a good actor and he's bringing a lot to it. So I was kind of interested to see, I think you judge an actor on what choices they make. And I thought, okay, he's playing Scaramouche Jones. Okay, I can see that. It's a bit like Archie Rice was an old school entertainer. This character was a clown, and you can draw on that. You can see why he's choosing these pieces and what he can bring to them. And that's why I was fascinated to see this. And I thought it was an absolutely astounding performance.
And how did we feel about the characterization? Because in particular, he is portraying a 99-year-old man. I mean, if you picture a 99-year-old man, you think of Prince Philip or Captain Tom most recently. But for me,
White.
Yeah, I mean, what did you think, Mae, about his physicality as an actor?
I thought his performance, not just his physicality, but his performance felt young for the role. Especially because I've never seen or read Scaramouche Jones. At the end, when he just kind of like falls inert, and basically it gives the impression that he died, it kind of felt like a surprise because he didn't feel like he was at the brink of death, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I did kind of like, I see your point. He did feel kind of like, and sometimes when I was watching it, I sometimes forgot that he was in fact 99 years old because of how active he was on stage and how active the character was, how the character came across as well.
I must say, it never really registered for me that, I know obviously he was supposed to be 100 or 99 years old, but it never even occurred to me that he was playing young or anything like that, or too young for it. It just didn't occur to me at all. I was too taken in by what was happening. I mean, it's very, very unlikely, but not impossible, that a 99-year-old man will ever play this role. You never know. You've got Ian McKellen playing Hamlet, so you never know. You never know, although he's not 99 yet. But it wasn't an issue for me at all.
I actually thought it was a very nice way of displaying your kind of internal monologue. I don't see this as Scaramouche addressing an audience. He's really talking to you, the audience, you, that one person. And in a sense, I feel like it's only when I look in the mirror I realise I'm not 18 anymore. Stone maybe, but I think one of the good things about this is that we do meet him, and he tells stories about his childhood and birth. He wouldn't know that, and then we see these kind of him at the pivotal moments of history. Again, how much of this is true? How much of this is conceived in his head? How much of it have we kind of witnessed? And I liked the performance. It didn't bother me at all that he wasn't old. I felt a little bit like what we were seeing was the best of him. So maybe his memories were taking him to his salad days, the glory time of when he could perform in that way. I bought into the fact that he was nearing death because he told us right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then thereafter, it didn't really matter. He could have done a cartwheel.
I just want to say that even though I felt like his performance was young, it didn't bother me at all. It just it's just the way that it came across, but it wasn't like a big deal to me whatsoever as well either.
And let's scrutinize his accent, because he, for the most part, he does quite a bold job of it. But there were flourishes where, I don't know if it was me, it just felt like a bit like, there's Shane. What did we feel, Ray?
Combination of brave choices, really. There were some moments, and this is coming from someone who could sound like he lives on Sloane Square or down on the docks on the East End, but there were some moments where I thought, oh, he is going to whack out the packet of Daz. But again, it didn't bother me because of the strength of his performance. I actually find some of these things quite bizarre when people adopt accents of the people they're having conversations with. And I think where he chose to do that, it was where it was written. And, some of the early dialect in Trinidad, for example, it clearly was written that way to be performative in that way. Where Shane seeped in was where it got a little bit eggy. But again, this is a love letter to Shane Richie. I just thought it was wicked. Forgave any sin.
So talking about the piece itself, had Paul or Ray seen it before? Mae, you've said you didn't. Had you seen it in other incarnations? And where did you see it?
No, I've never seen it before, I must admit, and I find that peculiar because it's such I've seen many one-man shows and small pieces. It's not an expensive piece to mount. It's a great showcase for an actor, but I've never actually seen this piece performed.
I saw Pete Postlethwaite do it. I think I was 19, and I didn't get it at all, and I was terribly bored.
Today. Good crowd. Oh, quite a good crowd. Not bad for a swan song. Our bloody parents these days clocking round their kiddies. Neurotic, that's what they are. They're far too bloody neurotic by half. I mean, they want to know what it's really like to... Oh, let the kiddies go. Fear and delight. What's wrong with a bit of fear and delight? Oh, wicked old clown, come and steal away your children, eh? Like the old Pied Piper, steal away, steal away, steal away, steal away, steal away too.
But yeah, and then I saw a production, maybe 2-3 years ago at Edinburgh, which again was just in one of those tiny comedy clubs. And I think people didn't realize, I don't think the bookers realized what it was when they booked it, because it was surrounded by stand-up comedy. But yeah, I'd seen it before, and I hate to say it, but it never really did much for me. I don't really remember anything of it. Maybe had I seen it now, I would, but no, I don't remember.
So going back to Edinburgh, was that Justin the writer himself who was performing? Because he did take it to Edinburgh. So you might have, so it wasn't that production.
No, definitely not.
Because as we say, he wrote it for himself, and then obviously it was given to the late, great Peter about a year after it was originally written. So Mae, you interviewed him recently. So could you tell us a little bit about that experience of his insight into why he wrote it, perhaps, and then later got to perform it himself? And he took it around the world. He took it to Adelaide Festival and other countries. So what was he like? Obviously, you interviewed him by email.
Yeah, it was a nice experience. I felt like how he was answering questions, you could kind of see the parallels between like his answers and like the performance itself or the script itself. But I think it's interesting that he did take it around the world, because his own adventures took him around the world as well, and his background obviously, and also like the performance itself is all this different, like kind of like a culmination of different experiences from different places. So that's kind of like a nice cathartic and maybe kind of sentimental thing for me that I really liked about interviewing him. And also the play itself is the way that, like, you know, he's obviously had all these experiences. He mentioned not just his experiences, but he mentioned his family background, the how do I say this? The variety in his lineage and stuff like that, and the way that he kind of embeds it into the actual play itself and into like the interview, which was kind of like reading a mini play itself, because it was not just a mini play, but like a mini story itself, because it was such a nice interview. Basically, I really liked it. It felt like he was storytelling it to me instead of just answering questions. So I definitely see where the script kind of borrowed some parts of himself into the actual like story.
Yeah, because he's famously said his only goal was to write something 100% attuned to his own tastes. And if anybody else liked it, so much the better. So Ray, as a writer, how do you feel about that? What a quote, eh?
I completely agree. I mean, the only thing that I've done of any note is about Judy Garland. So I don't think I can't disagree with him there. No, I mean, I thought the piece itself, there were moments where it almost was too big for itself, and some of the stories, and I think I said in my review, you know, when you're 41 minutes in and you've only got to the Battle of the Somme, you know you've got a long night ahead of you. And there were moments where I wanted to say, okay, can we wrap this up and move on? Let's get to Mussolini, because it is a little bit self-indulgent, but again, that's his absolute prerogative as the writer. He writes not to serve us as critics. He writes the piece that he needs to get out of himself. Whether or not we like it then is his gamble. And there were moments of it that I really enjoyed. There were moments where I thought this is just frankly bizarre. And there were moments that were very heartbreaking and uncomfortable. And I think all of those moments had their place in there. And rather like my responses to your questions, they could be trimmed down a bit. So yeah, I think I think he clearly, as Mae said, put a lot of his own experience, you know, not literally, but in life into this piece. And I think as an audience, it's always a joy to see that, and to try and find those moments as well.
And as you say, it was a long piece, especially for a one-man show. Paul, what were your thoughts about? How about the pacing? Did it feel too long?
Yeah, I'm with Ray on this one. I'd be interested to know actually for Edinburgh, was it edited at all? Because usually Edinburgh shows will run to an hour or just under, and this was what, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
Easily, and I thought it was a long old slog. But you see, this is one of the joys of this sort of thing is I would like to see Shane Richie do this on stage. I want to be in the room where it happens rather than sat watching him do it, because I don't think, well, I'm sure we'll get onto this later, I don't think the production did anything for it at all. And I want to be there. And if it's done nothing else, and this production tells me that Shane Richie ought to do this live.
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah, so like building from that about the production itself and the way it was set up. So we'll start with the fact that there was no audience. So how did that impact us as a viewer, do you think, and how did it impact Shane's performance? Mae?
No, I didn't really feel if there was anything missing to it. Maybe because I don't know if it was supposed to be performed with the audience participation in mind, or but the way that they did it, like you see it a lot with online plays now, is that they use they use cinematic kind of like techniques to give life to plays. So I like the whole thing about like, you know, using the camcorder, and then you see in the little corner like the batteries running out just as the play is going on and that kind of stuff. So I like that. I didn't feel like I was missing much as an audience member. I actually thought it was engaging because you could see like time passing as the performance is going on, and there are kind of like markers as to like the years that the years that have like the years that he's within and the years that has passed by. And so yeah, I felt like it didn't make me feel like I was included, but it felt like I wasn't excluded, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But that's just my opinion on it. Yeah, well, I just wanted to say though as well about like the pacing itself. For me, because it's an online play, there was a lot of breaks for me when I was watching it. Not sure if that's exactly how you're supposed to digest that kind of play, but I felt like if I would watch it in person, my attention span would just fly over the head. So that's why my rating was quite high on it, because I enjoyed it the way I consumed it. But if I saw it in live person, I don't think I will have that same experience. Yeah,
that's a very valid point, because I have to admit I pressed that pause button quite a few times and came back to it. I think, Paul, didn't you do it in a couple of sittings?
I did. That was purely a technical issue. I thought it was I think the way it was sent out to me, it said you can watch this now. So I watched it and I could see it counting down. And as you say, you get to the song and you think, cool, the last half is going to be really, really quick. And then it stopped. I'm like, oh, right. Am I where? And then I struggled with the technology and I think, oh, right, I see. And by then I couldn't watch anymore because I had other commitments. And I thought, right, I'll watch the second half another time. It's not a second half, but I didn't. The thing is, if I'd have been watching that in a theatre, it wouldn't have bothered me. I was so absorbed by it, wouldn't have bothered me. I could have quite easily sat there for an hour and a half, even though as long as it was, because Richie is such an engaging storyteller.
And Ray, so we're talking about the production itself and the lack of an audience. Did you feel it lost anything from that?
I think I'm beginning to get a little bit numb by the streaming process. I am really looking forward to getting back into a theatre with an audience and having that kind of collective enjoyment of something, and hearing people laugh or hearing people gasp or the odd sniffle. Or whatever it is. But I think at the moment my mind has actually, it's just adjusted to the fact that I'm going to be sitting on my own or with my significant other, and we might have a chat halfway through, or I might go and pour myself a martini or something. And I don't see there being a problem with that, because the theatre is in my own home. I don't think the production lacked anything, because we weren't watching it, and we weren't watching a recording in front of a live audience. And one of the things that I find really interesting now is the dialogue between us as audience members and the performance streamed is really different from a filmed with, in front of a live audience. The other day I was watching, just for pure enjoyment, Carol Burnett's skirt fall down during the filming of Back in Business, of putting it together in like early 2000 or something. And John Barrowman really embarrasses himself by laughing outrageously at this fact that her skirt's falling down. And he does it, and the audience laughs, and then he laughs some more, and the audience laughs some more. And it just was really uncomfortable to watch, because I was like, I'm not there. I'm kind of peeping through the curtain at something that happened between him and the audience. Whereas now, with the streaming, it's happening between me and Shane. And I actually really enjoy the streaming where there isn't an audience, and where there isn't, we're not the kind of the second class person peeking through the curtain. We're actually there with our ticket, if that makes any sense.
And let's talk about the director. So Ian Talbot is a renowned director, currently director. Is he back on The Mousetrap, I believe? I think when that comes back. Obviously, he was resident director for a number of years at Regent's Park. Is it an interesting choice? You talk about this filmic aspect, and I've seen recently a lot of these streaming sites, they're still getting theatre directors to direct them, and not embracing a director who perhaps knows more about film or has more of an insight into how to make a film. Do you think that's an interesting choice that they went for Ian? Paul?
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, I probably I'm a big critic of, or personally, I don't like theatre online. It hasn't worked for me. I really, really hoped it would, and I kept watching things, some of the greatest productions of the last 10 years from the National, and each time I switched it off. Even Hamilton, I couldn't watch halfway through. I just thought, do you know what? I'm not there. I'm not interested. I really am not. And I think, but what they're trying to create, and particularly I got this from Scaramouche Jones, is they were trying to create something of a cinematic quality and doing it really badly.
Yeah.
And I just thought, all I wanted was a camera in front of an actor, and I'd have enjoyed this much, much more. And that is the problem I had with it. Now, how that reflects on Ian Talbot and what he brought to the production, I don't know, because obviously he has to consider the fact that it is being filmed. He has to bring something to it. And I liked the idea that this Scaramouche Jones was filming the piece himself. I quite like that interesting idea. But the flicking of cameras and stuff like that, it's almost as if there are two directors on this piece, the person who's videoing it and the person who's actually directing it. And that clashed terribly for me.
I have to agree with him. Mentioned in my review that I wasn't a big fan of like the inconsistent camera cuts and the different angles that they implemented in it. I really like the camcorder setup, and I wish that would be the only thing that was there, instead of like, I can totally see where you're coming from with like the two different directions as well.
Mae, I think you make a really good point with the camcorder. For me, the camcorder also was representing him fading away as well. So as the camcorder was going down and losing life, so too were poor old Scaramouche. But I could not agree more. I just found, I mean, I love Ian Talbot, and I love the Shakespeares to the Pinafores, to the high societies, to the Forum. One of the best funny thing happened on the way to the Forum I've ever seen. I just thought this was shocking. and I say that with love, but it had very little redeeming quality on this kind of marriage between cinema and theatre. And I've been a real, Paul, I think I slightly differ from you in the sense that some of this stuff I've said has worked marvelously. I thought the Colour Purple, for example, well, I thought Sunset Boulevard, which was around Christmas time, was good, and then the Colour Purple came along, and that blew me away because I do think there was a real marriage between the gubbins and tricks of cinema, but it was still very theatrical. Here it felt like the editing and the cinematic quality was eating into the innate theatricality of the piece. It was almost an assault on the senses at some point as well, that I just did not enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, you said in your review, this production is a combination of excess that just doesn't make sense. And you even said nods to the Blair Witch Project became irritating quite quickly. So it was an interesting choice. Do we think it's an interesting piece for them to do? I mean, a lot of people have been talking about it, especially through the reviews, that it was quite, as a society, we've all spent a year kind of reflecting through our own lives and our own paths. And is this piece quite a good piece to bring to now? When we think about why they chose to, why put it on? What do you think, Paul?
Well, I know it's a good question, and one of the things it did make me think of is I worked a couple of years ago. I worked in a care home, and full of people in their final years who'd lived full and rich lives, and you'd listen to their stories and you hear their stories and you'd speak to them about what they've done. And we lost a lot of old people in this last year, lots and lots of old people. And I think there's a sense of history, and he talks about the last 100 years, and you think about some of the things that I remember. I used to sit and look at, we had the list of names of people in the care home, and one of the recognisable things with them, how you sort of dealt with them, is you had their date of birth in there. And this was like Downton Abbey years, their date of birth. And you just think, oh God, this is mad. These people had lived through so much, as had Scaramouche Jones, and he was talking about his life and how he has coped with his life, how he has dealt with his life. And I think to that extent, it is an important piece, and it's a valid piece to put on, I think.
Yeah, and obviously for you, mate, it's a new piece. So how did it feel for you seeing it for the first time?
Well, putting on my millennial goggles or young people goggles, the way that my generation basically consumes the media is a lot of like YouTube story time videos, that kind of stuff. I think it's actually a good piece to ease, well, maybe not ease, but it's a good piece to kind of like introduce maybe people of my age to an interesting form of telling history through one man's eyes, but also because a lot of the people, me including, myself including, when we consume media, most of us listen rather than watch YouTube videos and maybe even films and stuff like that. So I thought this was kind of like a good balance, basically. It was a nice piece to look at, but like I said, the cuts and stuff like that were kind of distracting. But just listening to it as well, there were parts where I just focused on him talking, and it kind of resonated with me more, especially bringing in the audio, not the audio, well, yeah, the audio, the music and stuff like that. Yeah. So it felt refreshing that way. I would have liked it. That's why I keep saying that the camcorder setup is like good for me, because like it's static, it's looking at one angle, and that would probably be the way that most of people my age would probably consume media, is just like one static shot of a person telling a story, and that resonates with us more than the fluctuation of different events happening all at the same time.
Yeah, because so Ray, you said that the soundscape in particular was too intrusive.
Yeah, well, I think everything was too intrusive. I think that the design, I mean, it looked like someone had dipped a load of Tesco's carriers in some red paint and put them all over the show. And the sound, you know, there were moments where the performance and the sound design just didn't match up.
Yeah.
And there were kind of quite poignant moments that would then, and particularly towards the millennium itself, where I was like, I can't hear. And maybe that's my people. I can't hear anymore. But there was definitely something that I was like, oh, hold on, what was that? And I think when any design element then just takes front and center, you've got the balance incorrect. And I mean any design element, everything has to work as a really kind of cohesive whole and support the text and support the vision. And there were moments where it just felt like everything was working at odds. And even to the kind of the literal design, there were mid-century modern, which is my latest trend indoors, but the kind of the chair and the piano and the desk, and then the cellophane. I don't know what the cellophane really represented. I had a few guesses, but none that we can share before the watershed. But that I just didn't get it, and that was my big problem. But and Phil, I wanted to just go back to your earlier question around was it a good choice? Because I really don't. I mean, if we have to endure 2 or 3 years of post-pandemic choices, I'm off. There's no way I'm going to sit through that. It was bad enough as it was. But what I found interesting with this is right at the beginning last year, we had the Alan Bennett Talking Heads. And Mae, if you haven't seen them, you definitely should.
I shot a man last week.
Really?
Nobody normally gets killed around here.
It just breaks your heart.
And you won't believe this.
Oh?
It was with a harpoon gun. Typical.
Because it is the kind of one camera angle, and they talk about going down to Bridlington to get themselves a cup of tea. But it really is very, very different. And that is just a monologue of someone telling you their story. And that was almost like, well, that's safe. You know, we're in the middle of the worst pandemic of 100 years. And, you know, and you could have one person talk to the camera and very little gubbins and kind of tech around it. Now we've moved on and we've got the stuff like Colour Purple and big musicals being streamed into living rooms, that it almost felt like Scaramouche would have been better placed had it been early on. And we were, all of us, you know, no matter how many people you have in your household, 1 or 500, we all felt very, very alone. And that kind of dialogue would have, I think, been better placed. I think what happened was a decision was made, and it just took a long while to get it to the camera. But it certainly has a place. But yeah, I mean, if we have to watch thousands of plays about the pandemic, that's it. I'm going back to reading.
But it was a very bold design. I mean, so this is Andrew Exeter, who recently designed high fidelity and hair for the Turbine Theatre, and most recently online he did Brooklyn, which was beautifully shot. So yeah, it was very abstract, very kind of out there.
But Phil, what he did with Brooklyn was quite similar to this, but it was just presented in a really different way. All of the torn manuscript paper in Brooklyn made sense, really made sense, and gave us that kind of earthy streetness to the piece that again was about the piece and served the piece. This just seemed like dressing. You know, oh, that looks like it. And I love a good window. You know, Selfridges at Christmas is my joy. But it almost felt like, oh, let's put the show on there because it looks quite nice.
Yeah.
Or it's funky. Funky is so boring.
But it is interesting if we do compare it to Lambert Jackson, because their progression as producers during the pandemic, if you look at Brooklyn as their most recent compared to the very first, with the last 5 years that they did, there was such a departure and such a kind of growth as producers. And with Ginger Quiff, who produced this, they too did do earlier things. They did Rose, which was very successful, and even made it to Sky Arts.
Little Wars.
Yeah.
They did that, didn't they? I'm sure they
Little
did.
Wars and Godspell in concert, and then they did Rose. So I mean, there's a variety within that, and I think another one called Falling Stars, which they filmed at the Union.
Ginger Quiff Media.
To Ginger Quiff, I mean, how many of those productions have you seen anything else by Ginger Quiff, Mae?
No, this is my first time seeing, so unfortunately I can't give much to this particular conversation, but I'd like to see more of their stuff if they could kind of find a balance between being cinematic and theater, because I think that film, when you're using camera angles, you're using filters, that kind of stuff, there's a purpose for it, but in Scaramouche Jones I didn't find any purpose into all the different cuts and stuff like that. And going back to what Ray said about the music being intrusive, I kind of got that as well a little bit. I felt like the audio levels were uneven. There are parts where like the audio took over the Shane talking, so some parts of the play I probably didn't quite get or understand or really get deep into because of like how much the audio was over, especially at the beginning. I that was the first thing I noticed, was that how loud the music was compared to how him speaking. But I did like at the very end when when he dies, that the song, the Party Like It's 1999 was playing. I thought that was kind of like a nice way to end the piece, and I thought that was a great decision. And I thought, yeah, that was a great decision, and that's kind of like the balance that I want from them, is like the balance of film and theater, and just finding reasons of why certain decisions are made.
Yeah, so Ray, what do you know of Ginger Quiff?
So I've seen all of the things, and they are really different. And the highlight for me before this were the performances of a whole host of British actresses in Little Wars. Stephen Carl McCasland, is absolutely a playwright to watch out for. He's doing a load of monologues at the moment and streaming them off his own back. I'm sorry, I'm going to give him a little bit of a plug. Go and look there. There's an actress, Catherine Russell, he's working with, and they are doing kind of 25-minute monologues that you can get on SoundCloud. Go and search them out. Stephen Carl McCasland is I think is going to be a real voice, a very good voice. But yeah, so Ginger Quiff, I think they've picked really good and varied stuff. I think they've also been looking at what everyone else has been doing, particularly Lambert Jackson, and almost pitching their tent to that, or trying to pitch their tent to that same trajectory. And I think Scaramouche was very much that. Everyone's talking about this marriage between cinema and theatre. Everyone's talking about how arresting designs can really, enhance your streaming experience. And I think what they did was just try and chuck everything into this. And it's almost like you've got that little jam jar that you're trying to chuck everything into, and ultimately it just bursts. And that's how I feel about this one. I think it was a bit of an own goal on their part, because they tried so much. And it wasn't just about the direction. It wasn't just about, a poor brief to the designers or whatever. I think it was a case of the producers saying, let's try and make this a real statement piece. And that's probably what everyone was told to do. And it maybe was a bit too much. But I actually think as a production company, they have produced a whole host of things that have been real highlights of the various lockdowns. And I'm really excited to see what they do in a theatre when we're all in there. Bags of tomatoes under our seats.
Exactly. No, and particularly because they've just hired Nikki Sweetland as their new production and casting coordinator. So they've obviously got plans and things coming up. Because this was
move.
Yeah. So I mean, she's knows her stuff. She was attached to the Theatre Cafe for a long time. It's very well known. So it's that question as well, because obviously with Lambert Jackson, a lot of people are speculating they've made a very, very good job of producing online content, but will it translate to the stage? And will they be as successful when it comes to returning to theatres? And what do we think about Ginger Quiff, Paul? You've known the lads, Thomas and Michael, for a number of years. So.
I have, yes, yeah. The earliest productions I saw that they did were at the, not under the Ginger Quiff, but Thomas Hopkins was a producer at the Old Landor Theatre.
Yeah.
3 shows that I quite liked. I thought they were really good. And then he sort of disappeared off the scene. And then returning, they did produce something at the Omnibus that I saw. And I think...
Country music.
That's the one, yeah, which was wonderful. And didn't it win something at the Office? The actor won.
Yeah, he won Best Actor. Yeah,
and deservedly so. It's a very good piece. So I fully expect that after the lockdown, that they will continue to do interesting things. Quite what the direction will be, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I will say I wasn't a massive fan of Falling Stars. I thought it was an odd piece to do. I found it very strange. Again, something I would be far more comfortable watching in a theatre than online. It just seemed odd online.
There's a guy on Waterback. Every time he takes me out, I hug him, I squeeze him, I tease him so, and we always can be found when there's no one else around.
Day will break and you'll awake and start to bake a sugar cake for me to take for all the boys to see. You never know as a singer what glorious forgotten melodies you might uncover in this sort of a place. So yes,
he has no bananas. He has no bananas today.
I quite like Godspell. I like the innovation of Godspell. I like the ambition of the piece. It's a difficult piece to do anyway on stage, and you think, well, let's play with it, and they did. And this one, again, I think the biggest thing that they had for Scaramouche Jones was Shane Richie, and they seemed to refuse to let that run.
Right.
They just threw lots of other things at it that weren't necessary.
it's interesting. So sticking with the producer, so we had making her debut as a producer, Amy Hart. So famed for Love Island, and then suddenly bursting onto the theatre scene as a kind of ambassador to what's on stage, it seems. I mean, Ray, I've got to commend you because you gave me my first opportunity as a producer when we produced Parade together. So, I mean, a lot of people do make this transition from performers to producers, and obviously we've got to commend anybody who does that. Was it an interesting choice for Ginger Quiff to approach Amy Hart? Because I did, when I was watching this piece, thinking, I wonder if Amy would have picked it, would watch this normally or gone to seen this.
Okay, I'm going to have to take a bit of an objection. We haven't got to commend anyone for doing anything. They've got to be good at it.
Yeah.
And there are things that I've tried to do when I was, trying my hand at writing or whatever it was, directing, where I wasn't very good at it. And I quite rightly was told by the critics that I wasn't very good at it. And so I stopped doing it. There's the old adage, stick to what you know. I don't understand why Amy was in any way interested in this piece. And I do commend putting your name to something that you probably haven't read. And I just didn't understand it. And I have to say, I'm really, quite taken with the fact that she did it. I'm not going to commend her for it, though.
Yeah.
I'd like to know exactly what she did and how involved she was. Do you know?
Well, that's the thing, because obviously the role of a producer is so varied. It can vary from like sourcing the money to general manager to just having
painting the scenery to doing anything. The role of producer is so varied, and it's not until you get to Cameron Mackintosh that you can pay other people to do what the producer does and put your name on the top. But I think I just went, really? And again, this really isn't me being snobby, because I have a huge amount of time for what Amy does as an ambassador for the theatre. And Amy has got people interested in the theatre who probably had never been in a theatre before. And having spent some time with Amy at the press night of Pretty Woman, which was another piece that I loved and people were amazed that I even turned up to see it. And I think she's a brilliant individual and an exceptional human being. But this, Amy and Scaramouche Jones are just two things that I think without a global pandemic and the world going crazy, we'd never have seen it. But yeah, I mean, I won't commend her because that's patronising. But what I would like to say is I'd like to see her find pieces that she's really interested in and produce that, leading it from the front, like Danielle Torrento does, for example. She's got such a good profile, Amy, and she's such a nice person that if she took a production that she really believed in, and it would have to be a musical, because I think Amy said on one of these things that she's only been to one play before this. Yeah. So, take a musical, love a musical, and use your star power, which she has, and your incredible personality to put that show on. And give Danielle Torrento a run for her money, or Katie Lipson. Because then it will be like Dynasty, with they'd all be fighting over the best musical in town. But one thing I would say as well, Phil, is I am a bit worried that we are just trying to love everything because the industry is on its behind. It really is on its behind, but our role is not to be cheerleaders. That really is Amy's role. And as you've always said, Phil, like, you don't do the reviews. You share the news and you celebrate the form. And I'm a bit worried that as critics, we're all being expected now to love everything because there's a huge amount of work that's gone into it at the worst possible time. Yeah. I want to love everyone's work, but I don't want to feel like I have to love the piece or the product. And I'd said that I wanted to say that, so I have now. We can move on.
No, I mean, that's a very valid point, because Paul, you've been very kind of fair. I mean, we have seen I mean, how many stars did we give this one?
I gave 3 stars to this one.
Yeah, but it's you're certainly not commending them just for putting something on.
Oh God, no. Well, the thing is, I mean, very early on in the pandemic, I think I gave a 2-star review to something I'd seen online, and I felt very bad about it. But I thought, you've got to speak the truth. You've got to speak the truth. And then there was a non-official memo going around, not at the stage, but online, saying anyone who gives anything other than 3 stars or 4 stars is all you're going to get through lockdown. And I kind of took that to heart, and I thought to myself, maybe that's the case. Now, a stage review doesn't give me enough space to go hugely into what I thought was wrong with the production. So I tend to speak about what is right with the production more than anything else. I loathe the star system. Yeah. I hate having to give stars for something. But in this case, I think 3 stars was fair, and all of those stars were for Shane. Basically, the rest of it, I thought to myself, you know what, that's not gonna win any favours at all.
Yeah, and Mae, you gave it 4.
Yeah. I liked it, despite all of the different. I based kind of new to the star system. I just recently graduated 2 years ago, so the upcoming was like the first publication that really hinged on like the star system for anything from film, TV to music. I base it on my enjoyment of it, but also base it on my enjoyment of other things as well. So like, for example, if I liked an album, and if I like to play, but I like the album a little bit better, more than the play would obviously have a lower star rating and stuff like that. And I actually do agree with what these guys have been saying, especially about like the patronizing thing. It's like you can't say that they did a good job just because they were able to do this during a pandemic, because that's it's rude to the people who were working hard on this, because you're basically giving them a good job for just doing their jobs, basically.
And how much guidance do the upcoming give you with regard to the star ratings? And has that changed during the pandemic?
Well, they help me out. Sometimes they steer me in the direction of like balancing my opinions, and as well as like being objective in like reviewing these things. So like I said, I base it on my enjoyment, but sometimes my editor would be like, since there wasn't too much wrong with the actual like performance, you have to give this either a higher rating than what you've given it, because there are often times where I would watch something and I would find a lot of good things in it, but I just wouldn't enjoy it as much as I would like to, even though I didn't find anything inherently wrong with it. And sometimes I would give it a lower star rating because comparing to the other things that I've seen and enjoyed, it just wasn't up to par with me. And they would be like, hey, can you rethink this, because there wasn't anything in your review that stated that like pulled it down, that there wasn't a lot of bad criticisms towards it, so you have to pull it up. So they've been helping me balance that, and it's still kind of like a learning curve for me, because obviously, like I said, I'm still new to theater reviews. I'm more privy to film and music reviews, but I've been enjoying theater. I only started doing theater reviews in November, and I think my first one was Mrs. Goldie versus the World, which I really liked. I really enjoyed that. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It kind of reminds me of this story time thing that I was telling you guys about, like just one angle, people telling the story and then going through their life's journey. Actually, Mrs. Goldie versus the World is kind of like a condensed version of Scaramouche Jones, because it talks about this one woman's life and her experiences, but it was 16 minutes instead of like an hour and 30 minutes, which was brilliant for me. I saw it in one sitting, but yeah, I'm still learning, and hopefully I get a little bit better than this. And I agree a lot with what you guys said, but like just being honest. Especially nowadays, you are tempted to kind of like give people a pat in the back for being able to just do things during the pandemic, because it is a hard time. But at the end of the day, people are wanting to find a good time as well, and you have to give them an honest opinion so that they can decide if they want to spend their time on this thing.
And often their money, you know, like, and it really is. This has been a horrible time for everyone, but it's just not our role to just say we have to support and give everyone an A+. You know, life isn't like that, and art isn't like that, and theatre isn't like that. There are good and there are bads. And I mean, before the pandemic, I remember everyone used to say it only got a 3-star, but it read like a 4-star review. And you'd think, no, you got 3 stars. You know? But everyone, you know, anything I went to see, any of my friends or in anything, they'd say, you know, oh, blogger or reviewer A gave it this, but it read like it was better. You know, what, were you reading it while you were singing? It's just a very bizarre thing. I do have a fear that as we start to open up and theatre comes back, we're going to be flooded with mediocre, and we're all going to be expected to say, this is brilliant because we're all in a room together. I'm really looking forward to being in that room together, but if I'm going to be in that room and then afterwards stand outside saying how terrible it was, I'm going to do that as well. I want to get back to what we had, which is, you know, good theatre criticism that doesn't pull its punches. And there's not a cat and house chance I'm going to give anyone 1 more star than they deserve, in my opinion. And I'm with you, Paul, and I'm with you, Mae. The star system is ridiculous. If we have a star system, just have stars. That we might as well not use our time writing paragraphs of prose. I much prefer opinion. And Paul's and Mae, your opinions on this, I think, were brilliant. And
likewise, I read, and I loved your interview as well, Mae, with Ian.
Thank you. That was all on Justin for having such long answers and insight. I just provided questions. So, but I liked learning from you guys as well, seeing a different perspective from a veteran in the theater industry. Hopefully this can help me in my future reviews of theater as well.
Amazing.
Can I borrow your millennium goggles, please?
Don't put them on. Once was enough in my case, I can tell you that.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's been brilliant. I've loved chatting to each of you. So I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of the sunshine while we've got such a glorious weather at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Phil. And lovely to see you all. Lovely to see you, Ray. Lovely to meet you, Ray.
Love to see you guys as well. Meet you. Hopefully we can do more of these kinds of things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Maybe if we run in the same theater circles, we'll see each other.
Yes. See you at an opening night sometime.
And Phil, just a thank you. Like what you continue to do for this industry, I think is marvelous. It really is informative, entertaining, and if you're watching this, this man works very, very hard to shepherd us all together and get us onto these things. So thank you massively as well. It's been wonderful.
Thank you for watching. These videos are made completely free, so if you have enjoyed it, please do share it and subscribe to my channel if you would like to. I'm also setting up a charity called That Fest to raise money and awareness for HIV charities. If you'd like to donate, please do find out all the information on my website.
Welcome to the first episode of Showdown. What a year it's been, hey? We've seen this complete revolution of online theatre now.
Every time Lambert Jackson announced a brand new musical they're doing online, I get excited and I want it to stay. I don't want online theatre to disappear because it's a great little medium.
Exactly.
I'm not convinced because I think that online theatre is a pale imitation of the real thing. I think there's a happy balance between the two, actually.
So, back to Brooklyn.
This is my first experience of it.
I've seen it twice.
I saw the original on Broadway in 2004. It's a pretty terrible show. But actually, and here's the thing, I thought that watching it on the video was actually excellent. They did a really good job of it, quite brilliant cinematography. It kind of sold itself because it was on TV.
I didn't think this particularly solved any of its problems. And while it was beautiful and it was performed brilliantly, I still don't think it's a very good musical.